Hey guys, welcome to my Insomnia Q&A episode. In this episode, I'm going to answer some of the questions that I collected from my followers on Instagram. And if you want to have your question answered in this kind of video, consider following me on my Instagram page. And there I often collect the questions from my followers so that your question might appear here as well in the next videos. Today I will be answering 4 questions, and before I begin I want to say that none of this is a medical advice. I'm not a doctor and not a therapist, so I'm just sharing my personal thoughts, experience and ideas. Let's begin with the first question from Christelle. So Christelle asks, automatic sleep thoughts will still come to my mind forever? Is it a pattern that can't be erased anymore? So here I want to say about automatic sleep thoughts. Generally, almost all our thoughts are automatic, so they just come to our mind, just kind of pop up, and most of these thoughts don't carry any importance to our mind, but for some reason sleep thoughts, thoughts that are related to topic of sleep, they might be marked by our mind as something very important. So anytime we have a thought which is somehow connected to sleep, we get very alarmed, we get very hyper aroused, and of course they don't feel pleasant. So in a way, I want to say that, once we recover from insomnia, once we kind of no longer have the fear of not sleeping, which is basically the definition of insomnia in the way how I explain it here. So once we don't have that emotional response, then no automatic thoughts, no thoughts regarding sleep will be bothering us. It doesn't mean that we will never have any thoughts regarding sleep, because honestly, I'm now currently talking to you about a sleep topic, and definitely I have thoughts that are related to sleep, but because there is no more fear around that, those thoughts never bother me, they never kind of like trigger any emotional response in me. And for me, this is the understanding of recovery, meaning that you can have all sorts of thoughts. They could be related to sleep, for example, like, okay, I have to wake up tomorrow at 6 o'clock and so on, something like this. They are still sleep thoughts, but they don't necessarily trigger us anymore. The reaction on these kind of thoughts is not a forever thing, but we cannot really guarantee that we will never have thoughts at all, because it's impossible to not have particular thoughts. In fact, when we block or forbid ourselves to have certain thoughts, we usually tend to think about them even more. So the problem is not in the thoughts itself, the problem is in our reaction, and this is something that we can definitely change for good. Okay, the next question is from Sarah. What do you think of the military method of falling asleep fast? I think trying to do this was a huge cause of insomnia for me. Well, I love this question because I also read about these military methods and all sorts of like 60-second method or for falling asleep, and I can totally imagine how these can create insomnia, which is basically fear around not being able to sleep. It definitely has no real power to put us to sleep. Nothing can produce sleep at all, not even like some military methods, which usually have this kind of I would say marketing around it, because we think about military as something that, okay, this is something that has a strong level of control, that it's very accurate, very powerful. In reality, there is no such thing as some particular method can put us to sleep. And in fact, I don't say that this is something like no one should use it, or it's just useless to practice it, but I just want to say that if it is called military, so I assume that it's used somehow in the army, where the probably people are not really struggling with sleep itself. They have much more other topics to solve, so sleep is not really their priority. So when they begin to use some sort of like quick methods, whatever that method is, they are not really trying to sleep. They are just using it without being actually attached to the outcome. And maybe in this context it possibly can do some effect for them, but I don't really think that it can put us to sleep. It never worked on me, and I talked to people who also were reading about that, and it didn't work for them either. So I really don't see any magic in this kind of method. It's just another quick fix. That is never quick. Next question is from Raji. I hope I read it correctly. Okay. Can 2 hours napping in the day cause nighttime insomnia or bad night of sleep? Well, this is an interesting question because generally I have a very liberal opinion on napping, especially during insomnia. In my opinion, napping is completely allowed. There's no reason why we should avoid napping. But we also need to realize that, okay, if 2 hours of sleep and we sleep, we take a nap let's say in the evening, of course it's going to impact how sleepy we are in the end of the day. So maybe if we slept 2 hours at 6 p.m., then most likely we will be more awake when it will be our bedtime. So it's completely normal because there's part of, rest has happened. So we are not really that tired. But I don't think that napping even 2 hours can cause insomnia. Insomnia is the fear around sleep. So the naps itself, they don't create the fear. It's only our reaction to having no control over sleep or not being able to sleep is something that creates this pattern where we begin fear sleeplessness. But in reality, even if we think about 2 hours when we don't when we sleep, then it seems very unlikely that 2 hours can take away all our night sleep, because usually on average people sleep a bit more. So even if we happen to sleep 2 hours during the day, maybe before or around noon after lunch, then I don't think that it can somehow severely impact our night. It might happen that some people will feel more refreshed in the end of the day, but we all need to think about what makes sense to us, because of course, if we take nap in the end of the day, that doesn't really make sense. So just using common sense here, what makes sense to you. And even if it happens, even if we happen to take a 2-hour nap during the day, it is our reaction that can actually cause more sleep troubles in, let's say, next nights, because we will be thinking that we somehow disturbed our sleep drive and so on. But in fact, the hyperarousal, rather than the lack of sleep drive, will cause us to be awake. So I hope that makes sense. And the last question is also from Sarah. I'm in a massive speed bump situation this week, and I think my problem is that I have a fear of boredom while waiting to fall asleep. So my question is really what to do about this, because my mind starts racing with thoughts on how to avoid being bored and the night rapidly because insomnia is a mess. Okay, so here when Sarah mentions the fear of boredom, it doesn't really sound to me like a boredom in reality, because in truth, if we would be actually bored, we probably wouldn't have this issue. Because think about the moment when we are bored, we are kind of indifferent to anything. But here I would say we can also translate it as fear of having nothing to do regarding sleep itself. So I just want to explain this a little bit, the situation, because I had it as well. So as the nighttime or approaches, evening starts, we start getting all sorts kind of thoughts like, okay, what shall I do? How to prepare for this night? How shall I, shall I calm myself down, or should I do this or should I do that? So we basically don't know what to do. And in a way, our mind thinks that there is a right way how to end day and start night. And we are trying to figure it out, how to do it in the best way. And in reality, it puts a lot of pressure on ourselves, because, we begin to think okay, we need to protect our calmness. We need to protect our sleepiness so that we are sleepy enough. So before we go to bed, we make sure that we are not worried, we are not hyper aroused. And paradoxically, this kind of preparation for the bedtime is what usually leads to feeling hyper aroused the moment when we hit the pillow. So I want to say here is that it is not the problem of the boredom or about just having a spare hour or two before bedtime. It is about our thinking process here. Again, during the time, the brain starts sending us warning signals. So these thoughts that happen before, going to bed are usually automatic. What should I do? How to make sure that I'm not anxious? What kind of thoughts I should be thinking? All of these thoughts are automatic, and they are the part of that safety system, if I can call it like this, where our brain just tries to keep us safe from not sleeping. And we can look at it as for what it is. We don't have to trust those thoughts. Those thoughts actually are just random, ideas that the brain shoots at us. It doesn't mean that we need to actually act on them and we need to somehow entertain ourselves. In fact, when we try to do that, the brain will get a kind of like a feedback that, okay, really there's something to be embraced for, and we begin to feel more anxious. So here, like the first step, it would be definitely always catch ourselves the moment when the brain starts having this kind of thoughts, and remind ourselves that these thoughts have nothing to do with the reality. We don't have to think of the perfect way to end the day and start the bedtime, because there is no right or wrong way when it comes to sleep. So with that kind of like understanding the nature of those thoughts, we can ask ourselves what makes sense for us to do right now, because maybe we have spare hour or two. And now if we think about anyone who doesn't have insomnia, then they would probably find something to do, and they would not put any importance on that activity. Think about this time as actually a time resource. You have extra time on your hands, and knowing that we cannot do anything to fall asleep, we cannot prevent sleeplessness from happening, because like sleep can be different. It is normal if it takes more time to fall asleep, but what makes sense to do for ourselves right now? Maybe it is just reading a book or watching something, or I don't know, listening to a podcast, anything that makes sense and has nothing to do with sleep itself. Don't put too much weight on this period of time, how to remove that boredom or find the perfect activity for yourself, because the truth is, it doesn't matter what you do before your bedtime. It really doesn't matter, because nothing can put us to sleep artificially, or nothing out there can produce sleep. So it makes sense to do something that we actually want to do, not something what we think we are supposed to do. Okay, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found something helpful here, and if you want to participate in this kind of videos, so make sure that you're subscribed to my Instagram page and look for stories. Sometimes I post there the window where you get the chance to ask your questions. I also want to say special thanks to my Patreon supporters. I really appreciate this help, and if you want to also support Sleep Talks channel, you can do so. I'll provide all the links in the description. Take care.